Ato Elohim, Toyeri Yedevei V'Yevevei Shachas, Oyan She'odot Mi Yeyeyim, Devanu, Lavoy, Lo Yegetzoyim Eyem, An She'odot Mi Amen. Yachto Yemeyen, Mama, Rekagba, Yevdama, Rekagba, Ani Yevdama, Yevdama, Yevdama,
We find ourselves in the evening between Tes and Yud Kislev, which is basically marking the 2 days and 3 major events in the lifetime of the Michoel Rebbe, who was the son of the second Rebbe of Chabad, and he is the son of the Alter Rebbe, Balatanya. He was his successor. So Michoel Rebbe was born and was installed on the very same day, Tes Kislev, and he was redeemed a year before his istalkos on Yud Kislev. So Mele, when we think about the major events in the Michoel Rebbe's life, it's basically in these 2 days. That's throughout the year. These are the 2 days which commemorate these 3 events: the birth, the istalkos, and the Gula. The Michoel Rebbe was a Rebbe Nesios for 15 years. It was from 1813 till about 1827. It was a very short time. The Michoel Rebbe was nostalgic at a young age. He was 54 years old. The Michoel Rebbe said before his istalkos that the Alter Rebbe, his father, when he came to 54, he was arrested. And he said that it seems like the second option it was left for him. So it was basically he would travel a lot for curing, for different places, Madenbad, other places to curing himself. He was Michoel weak, not mamish, a very strong person, the Gashmias. And as mentioned here, he was nostalgic on the same day that he was born, 54 years later. And as the Rebbe mentions from our Chazal, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu memalish neseim shel tzadikim b'yom liyom, that every day is calculated, and Memele, it was b'yom shenelad, that day he was niftar, as we find by Moshe Rabbeinu. Basically, that this shows how the life is complete. And as the Rebbe explains, that the union of the life is complete is not only benegea to the inyanim alone, the events that he accomplished, but in addition to that, the life is complete, that also to the day, exactly a full amount of years, a shleimus, what it was then, 54 years, but exactly to the day, that everything was precisely calculated. The Michoel Rebbe, as mentioned, was the son of the Alter Rebbe, and he was the successor of the Alter Rebbe. And during the lifetime of the Alter Rebbe, he would already review the Maimorim, the discourses that his father delivered. And in addition to that, he would also, at a certain time, he started to say his own discourses. And generally, although a son would not deliver a discourse during the lifetime of his father, but in this case, it was an exception, one of the exceptions from the Rabbeim, that the Alter Rebbe, when he saw that the Michoel Rebbe was saying, delivering discourses, he said that the Almighty has shown to Adam, to Adam Arishon, he showed him every generation and its orators, the ones who will be speaking in that generation, the Darshonim, der v'dershaf. So already the Alter Rebbe says, I see already what the next generation looks like. So basically, the biography of the Michoel Rebbe was born in the year 1774, late 1773. He was born a year after the passing of the Mezritcha Maggid. And the Mezritcha Maggid said, you will have told the Alter Rebbe, you'll have a son, don't forget to name him after me. And that's why the Michoel Rebbe is named after Mezritcha Maggid. By 14 years old, the Michoel Rebbe married. This was the Seder in those years, not only in Chabad, but also in other, especially in rabbinic families, that they married early. And by 14 years old, he married the daughter of a chassid. And that chassid, the shidduch came about from the Alter Rebbe himself. What happened was, this chassid had a house full of daughters. And he had a hardship marrying up because he didn't have money to support. Nobody wanted to make a shidduch with him. The Alter Rebbe says, I'm going to make a shidduch with you. As soon as that happened, everybody jumped in. So basically, the Michoel Rebbe married the Rebbetzin Sheina, and then at a certain point, the Alter Rebbe appointed his son when he was 16, 17 years old to be a guide, a mashpia, and he was a mashpia for Jungelite who would come, knock on the door to speak with him. And there was once a story that's told, that Rebbe mentioned that story in the lesson of this story, that they once came to the Michoel Rebbe to consult with him, and the Michoel Rebbe said that the person that you're looking for is not here now. What does that mean? That the person you're looking for, the Michoel Rebbe explains, you're not looking for my flesh and bone, you're looking for my mind and heart. And my mind and heart is somewhere else. Lashon HaGemara, there's a Lashon in Shavuos, it says, Lava Daite. His mind, it didn't talking about a certain minor thing. He forgot where he put it, from this way, from there, from here. So it says, Lava Daite. There's certain things we don't expect a person should remember everything vividly. Here, it says the union of Lava Daite, the Michoel Rebbe says, I'm not here now. I'm somewhere else. My mind and heart is somewhere else. So this story the Rebbe once used by Farbrengen. The Rebbe opened up once a Farbrengen Shabbos B'chokei site of Shin Yud Gimel 1953. As soon as he came into Farbrengen, he started with this story. And the Rebbe said that it's Shabbos Mevorchim, it's Shabbos Mevorchim Sivan. And the Rebbe was implying like the people, the audience there who are here, the Rebbe says, are not here. In other words, the Rebbe knew exactly where their minds were wandering off. And the Rebbe says that sometimes when it comes to auspicious time, so a person could feel, I'm not here now, physical. The Rebbe says a person has to put in an effort when it comes to an auspicious time to be there, to draw from the energy that is given on such an auspicious day and accomplish, because it's an Eis Rotzen. Lesson that we derive also in a practical sense is that sometimes a person can come to another person and wants to talk over something with him, and the other person would feel, what does he have to waste time? What does he need to apply his attention and focus on what this friend is telling him? I'll make an impression that he's listening. I'll let the person talk off from his heart, and then again weiter. The person will feel, he already said what he needed. The worry, he already gave it over to someone else, and finally. So here,
press mute. And
and from this we understand, but from this story, what we derive is that it's not so. The Michoel Rebbe says, if I'm not able to give you undivided attention, I'm not here. So although the person can come and talk, and the person would think, may figure the Michoel Rebbe is listening, but if the Michoel Rebbe is not listening, and the Michoel Rebbe was very sincere with him, he says, I'm not here now, come another time. I can't give you full attention now. The Michoel Rebbe, as mentioned, was a mashpia, and there are certain words that the Michoel Rebbe said, interesting insights in certain expressions in Tilim, and stories. And one of them is that the Michoel Rebbe once went in and he saw people very depressed. Hasidim were not really uplifted, not in a positive mellow mood. So he asked, "What's geschehen?" So the Michoel Rebbe says, the literal meaning of the verse, Atzabeim Kesef V'Zov. Atzabeim means their idols are made from silver and gold. But Atzabeim also means Atzvus, depression. Why is the depression come? It comes from money. Because maybe they didn't make it exactly. So Mela, this brings in a depression for a person. There's a famous word that I heard from once a Yid, the Rebbe referred to him as a partisan, and he said a word that the whole world is a mashal. The whole world is a parable. The nimshal is geld. In other words, everything turns around that. The bottom of everything, you dig it, it's all money. This way, that way. So basically, that's atzabeim kesef v'zov. The atzvus is because they're lacking from gold and silver. Another word that he once, the Michoel Rebbe commented on when he heard it from a doctor in the time of the Alter Rebbe, it was a doctor, Rabbi Hareifa, and they would use leeches to draw blood, to clean the blood, to cleanse the blood. So they would pick up the leeches in the field, and there was a certain season, and that he would have a store that whatever it's called, bankers, they would use it to draw the blood. So the Michoel Rebbe heard that the doctor once said, Rabbi Hareifa said, Sie schon tief in Elul, und noch nicht lang geklimmt die Piafkes. It's deep in Elul, which means the season is almost over, and I didn't really manage to find many of these Piafkes. So the Michoel Rebbe took this word, and he says it's deep in Elul. Aved of Elul, connecting with Hashem, especially Al Chassidus in a positive light, Anila Deidi V'Deidi Li, which is a Rosh Tevis Dafka from the Bach. And the Mele, it is basically connecting to Hashem, but the leeches, I didn't find enough leeches basically drawing the blood out. There's the blood, which is the heat, the zest, the fervor of a person, which a person has to clean in order to use it out for Kedusha. To use it out for Torah mitzvahs, a person has to put his whole liveliness into it. So he says it's deep in Elul, although the Aved already has to be to become closer to Hashem, but he did not manage yet to get these leeches, which are basically to take out the bad blood, to take out the evil desires and the wrongful deeds. So this is basically how the Michoel Rebbe explained what it means deep in Elul. The Michoel Rebbe was helping his father, and at a certain point, the Alter Rebbe gave him over different tasks, and then it came the war with Napoleon, and the Alter Rebbe said that under no circumstances he wants to remain in Liadi, which is where the Alter Rebbe lived up till then, but he has to leave. It was a Friday, noontime, and they heard the French armies advancing, and the Alter Rebbe said immediately, "We're leaving." It became a big chaos in the house. The family started to cry, the women, the children. The Alter Rebbe was very adamant about it, and he said, "What's the crying now? We have to act accordingly. We have to go out as soon as possible." The Alter Rebbe did not want to be under Napoleon even one day. He said, better to die than to be under him. There were other tzaddikim that felt there's a benefit for Napoleon because he is going to help the financial condition of Yidden. So the Alter Rebbe says financial condition one thing, but Ruchnias, in a spiritual sense, there won't be one Yid left with Yiddishkeit in Russia. There's a letter from the Michoel Rebbe, he writes the whole thing in detail. So the decision point was actually, the Alter Rebbe is actually leaving. It's Friday, and they hear shooting different divisions. The Russian army was surprised by a French division, which hit them in a very soft spot. And the Michoel Rebbe goes into the details. How many soldiers this group had, division had, this one had, what kind of armory they had. It's amazing, which is an inyan for itself, that the Michoel Rebbe should go into all these details. The Michoel Rebbe himself did not even know how to identify a value of a coin. He was completely, as the Lashon Gemara that Meniger Tarfun, Surah de Matbeya. He didn't even know, he didn't even look at it. He was completely removed from everything. But once he knew this is his father's wish, he got himself involved and mentioned the names of the generals who came along with Alter Rebbe and guided them. And the Alter Rebbe was the one that made the decisions. Every turn was made by the Alter Rebbe. The Alter Rebbe left with 28 people from his family, children, and grandchildren, with another 60 wagons following them. Imagine 60 wagons running from an enemy. It's not an easy task. Shabbos, the Alter Rebbe said, we have to go. It's a mitzvah to save oneself from mazikim, from those who can hurt us. The Mele he drove, the Alter Rebbe himself drove the wagon, and they felt mamish like they were flying in the air. And then they continued till a certain point, and that's how they were constantly for 4 months, Russian cold, running from Elul till Tevis. And the Michoel Rebbe wrote a letter to Rab Meishe Meislish, who was a spy for the Russian army, after the Stalkus of the Alter Rebbe, telling him exactly what was going on by the Alter Rebbe in that run. He was spying on Napoleon, the Chassid. He knew French, he knew Russian, and at one point Napoleon had a suspicion that he was spying, and he put his hand on his heart. And Rabbi Meisher Meislish remembered what the Alter Rebbe writes in Tanya, that the mind controls the heart. So he immediately stabilized, and he couldn't detect anything, Napoleon. And he was giving over the information to the Russian army. When it came Rosh Hashanah, the Michoel Rebbe writes that after Tkiyas, the Alter Rebbe said, Hayem ro'isi l'mayla didon natzach. That I saw it now, up there, that didon natzach, we won, we're victorious. Now, the Tkiyas Sefer by the Alter Rebbe that day did not take place after Kriyas HaTorah. It took place before Shachris. Because what happened was, there were tzaddikim that decided in another place, they were for Napoleon, that whoever blows Sefer first wins the war. And they knew it. The Alter Rebbe blew Sefer before Shachris. And we're not talking about plain people. These tzaddikim, when they came to hold the Sefer, they sensed Alter Rebbe already grabbed it.
What time did you wake up to Chassidus?
It was a whole Seder. I'm sure the Alter Rebbe prepared with it in every way.
All night.
Yeah, the pale, what Alter Rebbe said, Ro'isi ayem shadidon notzach. Erev Yom Kippur, the Russian government was going in exile, and the Michoel Rebbe sees they're still running. And he had the bitochen the Alter Rebbe promised. So he came to the Alter Rebbe and he said to Alter Rebbe, how you talking? You promised us. Alter Rebbe was then in Talis and Tefillin. The Alter Rebbe says, I'm not lying. I won't say something not true. I'm in Talis and Tefillin. The war was won already, but he's still trying with his last retreat, trying to reach Moscow to make a point, but he will go back, return, and the Alter Rebbe gave him a sign which road he will take to go back, which trail, and because he's going to be looking for food for his soldiers, and it's over. On the way, the Michoel Rebbe's wife gave birth. This is the middle of the running, in the cold and everything, and it seems like that child did not last long, and they needed to bury it on the way. And the Michoel Rebbe writes also about the bris, that they didn't have anything besides rice and mashka. That was basically the Suda. What did they have for a bris in the middle of the... Yeah. So there's a word that's told from the Alter Rebbe. I heard it from a few people already, that the Michoel Rebbe was very upset. To bury a child in the middle of the road, not a cave or nothing. The Alter Rebbe said, not where one is buried is where he stays, is where he remains. In other words, the Eibishter takes care of the rest. So basically, the Alter Rebbe was comforting the Michoel Rebbe, he will be in the right place. The Michoel Rebbe writes, the danger that they found themselves in running And even when they stopped in different villages, it was dangerous. All the anti-Semites, they were all screaming at them. They were ready to destroy. But the Michoel Rebbe says, thanks to Hashem, and especially we had 60 wagons of Chassidim, they alone could have destroyed a city. So Mela, they didn't fear them. At a certain point, the Michoel Rebbe was sent on a mission. We don't know how many weeks before these Talkos, that the Alter Rebbe planned to settle in Kremenchuk. And he wanted to, he sent him that he should check out the place. So the Michoel Rebbe left. In the middle of the war, he went to a different place. The Alter Rebbe was left with his family members, the Tzemach Tzedek, his son Rav Chaim Avram, but he didn't, but the Michoel Rebbe had a mission. So the Michoel Rebbe was not there by the Stalkus. It was after the Alter Rebbe was nostalgic, the Michoel Rebbe heard about it, and then the Michoel Rebbe was offered the city of Lubavitch. And the gubernator of Lubavitch offered the city of Lubavitch as a gift. He'll rebuild it to the Michoel Rebbe after the war with Napoleon. And Memele, he will, this will be where he settled. Michoel Rebbe agreed, and the Rabbeim lived there for 102 years. The Rabbeim, 5 Rabbeim, lived there for 102 years. The Alter Rebbe was there also for a short time when he was a child. One of these teachers who was a Nister, one of the Nistarim, Rabbi Sachaber, he would come to learn there. So he was actually also in Lubavitch. So 6 out of the 7 Rabbeim were in Lubavitch. The whole Eifim, the Nekuda is that after that the Michoel Rebbe took over, and the Michoel Rebbe started the teachings of Chassidus in a very great thrust, in a very broad sense way. The Michoel Rebbe is referred to as Recheves HaNor. Recheves HaNor means the riverbanks, like riverbanks that pour over. The Michoel Rebbe would say without limitation. The Rebbe mentions that he could say Maimorim for 16, 17 hours. The Chassidim of the Michoel Rebbe were very connected with the Michoel Rebbe. And by them, they felt this is it. We have the Geula. What's the Geula? Revelation of godliness. The Michoel Rebbe would say for hours Maimorim. And he would ask that Chassidim should repeat the Maimorim in the different cities. And they were Chassidim, so professional, they would even be able to repeat a cough. Bishas the Alter Rebbe, Michoel Rebbe said them. The Rebbe mentioned the point of that by Farbrengen once. So, Bechole, from the Michoel Rebbe's Chassidim were very into Chassidus, lived with Chassidus. There was a story about a certain Chassid who fell into a pothole in Russia, and there's no one to take him out. He couldn't help himself. And Chobish Materatz and Beisasurim, he had a page of Chassidus. He took it out and started to learn it. There was another time that the Chassidim of the Michoel Rebbe were talking in Chassidus, and they went into a place which wasn't supposed to go into. We don't know what it is. So when they came to the Michoel Rebbe to ask for a tikkun, the Michoel Rebbe said that he laughed it off. The Rebbe says there's a true union of Ufaratsta. The Michoel Rebbe, if a chassid felt that he's regaining arrogance from saying Chassidus, the Michoel Rebbe once told him, I'll say it first in Yiddish, because this is where the richness is. Atzibel soll von dir werden, aber Chassidus aus der Chasen. An onion should become of you, but Chassidus you should chazen. What is the union of an onion? An onion is something which is sharp, and it can change a taste of something. In Allah, an onion in kashrus is a problematic thing, because it's not just a regular something which is cold, or here this is something which is sharp. So it really has a taste remaining in the knife and whatever dealt with this onion. So he says, although it can sweeten it, the onion sweetens the thing, from deswegen, that says, in other words, although sweetens after a day, after a few days, after 24 hours, from deswegen, sorry if that's a few matter, so the whole Eifim, it's more than just 24 hours. Nevertheless, the union of a person should know that he's chazan Chassidus, although he takes credit for it, he should still continue. Because basically, it's a union of saving lives. And the people are listening to Chassidus, and B'meila, this inspires them, this awakens them. This is, as the expression is, Mayim Korim al Nefesh Ayefa, cold water on a tired soul. So the Eber says, we find ourselves in the time between the 2 days, the day of the birthday and the passing and the redemption date of the Mittel Rebbe, right in the middle, which means that it includes both days, as the Rebbe once spoke of what it means, a mediary between. As the Mittel Rebbe himself was called the Mitteler, the reason he was called the Mittel Rebbe because he was the many different explanations. One explanation that the Rebbe Rashab says is because he was the middle agent between Hashem and the Jewish nation. And the Rebbe Rashab adds, what the Mittel Rebbe gave Chassidim, nobody gave Chassidim. Another point, the Mitteler, which is a technical part, is that there were Chassidim that lived and saw 3 Rebbes at least. Alter Rebbe, the Mitteler, Tzemach Tzedek. Because between the Mitteler Rebbe and Tzemach Tzedek, between the Alter Rebbe and Tzemach Tzedek, there were 14 years. So many Chassidim made it into. There was actually a Chassid that saw 6 Rebbes. There was one Chassid. He saw from the Alter Rebbe till the Frierdiker Rebbe Nekrib. And he, when you think historically speaking, from the Alter Rebbe's Histalkus till the Rebbe's birth is 89 years. 89 years. If a person was in the right time and in the right age, right place, could have seen. It was a chain, one of the chains who Mamish was from the older Chassidim, he saw till the Frierdiker Rebbe Nekrib. There was a Chassid in Lubavitch in 770, Crown Heights, Rabbi Yudel Chitrik. Rabbi Yudel Chitrik was born in 1899. And he was after that, he was Mashpia Montreal. He saw the Rebbe Rashab, he saw the previous Rebbe, and he saw the Rebbe. He lived till 106. How did he get that bracha? He was Yud Shvat. The Rebbe was Farbrengen. The first Yud Shvat, the Rebbe accepted the Messias. The Rebbe delivered his first Maimer discourse, and he was very excited. And he went over to the Rebbe and he told the Rebbe, Chassidim have manoah gehat from the Maimer. They enjoyed the Maimer. It's the first Maimer the Rebbe delivered. Chassidim waited a year for the Yartzeit, Lula. So the Rebbe says, give me a bracha. So he said, to give a bracha, you need to say Mash'er L'chaim. The Rebbe asked he should bring L'chaim, or wine. The Rebbe gave him mashke, wine, and he told the Rebbe that the Eibishers will help him, that everything that the Rabbeim wanted to accomplish in all the years should be fulfilled through you. The Rebbe said, Amen, lang leben zolter. You should live long. He lived till 106. He was once watching 2 of his great-grandchildren or grandchildren texting each other. It was before WhatsApp. He was nifted 2006. And he was watching that, and he says, Verstehen ist bechlava da tutzach. How are you guys able to communicate in one part of the world to another? So they said, Zeide, du älter werden, wirst du verstehen. You get older, you'll understand. He was already 100 years old then. So basically, he lived into this age. He lived through 3 centuries, 1899 through the 20th century, first into 2006. Cholim is a very geschmack yid. The Nekuda I want to bring out is when he gave the Indian of getting back when he gave the Mittel Rebbe that it was a famous Hanor river, bank rivers, which means that a person, when it comes to such a day, makes a resolution to increase in the study of Chassidus and basically conducting oneself according to the teachings of Chassidus. And especially we have Maimorim of the Mittel Rebbe in Teres Chaim, very, very Gishmakim Maimorim that he speaks on Chumash Breishis, goes through the Parshias and discusses them up in Chassidus. Amaisa with Vayetze Yankiv Meber Sheva, Vayishlach Yankiv, in Vayetze we have the Lovan Shtei Bonis, what does Rochel Leah symbolize, signify Lamaila. It's very, very interesting, Yonim, how a lot of spiritual activity is going on in the Parsha. And when we look at the Parsha, we think, oh, it's saying Lovan, the sheep of Lovan. But the CS is, Mittel Rebbe explains these are neshamas that Yankiv was dealing with. Different neshamas, Latufim, different kind of neshamas. So it's basically a whole different world when we look at it Lamaila. As the Shalosh says, Hateda medaberes bel yenim umemaramezes b'achtenim. Teda is actually talking about the higher. It's merames, it's hinting in a physical sense to this physical world, but actually it's all a reflection from above. So the Eber says that we should be inspired from this day. This is, as Friedrich Rebbe once said, Yud Kislev is the birth of a chassid, Yud Kislev is the bris. So it goes together. And Yud Kislev is basically the preparation for Yud Kislev. Because originally, Yud Kislev was the first one in history. Then came Yud Kislev. Then came Tes Kislev. Right? Yud Kislev happened by the Alter Rebbe. Tes Kislev and Yud Kislev happened by the Michoel Rebbe. So the Rebbe says, why is it they're coming in the opposite way? Theta, chronologically, if they came first, they should have been later. Al derech Chanukah first, then should be Yutas Kislev, and then should be Tes Kislev. So the Rebbe says, because as the generations move down, we need more enhancements and more assistance from auspicious days. So therefore, originally Chanukah, then came Yutas Kislev to prepare for Chanukah. Now we have Achana for Yutas Kislev, we have Tes Kislev and Yud Kislev. That gives us an auspicious preparation of 10 days to prepare for Yutas Kislev. And this is by making resolutions, learning Chassidus, and understanding Chassidus. The Rebbe said, learning Chassidus is not just to believing, to trust that the Rebbe said what he said, the Rabbi said what they said, and I trust them. The Rebbe says, no, you don't understand something, knock on the window, knock on the door, even if it's in the middle of the night. Because you don't understand it, you don't take it just with trust. The Rebbe says, we should be able to fulfill this all, b'shleimus, the Tachlis Hashlemus. L'chaim, l'chaim,
Amen.
Yeah.
The Capella, the Capella, the Michoel's Capella.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Here, volume. Rabbi, say something. David, you hear it good? Oh. Yeah, I don't know. I can't hear anything. Oh, okay. Okay, good. Now we're good. Thanks. Hayom Kotzer Malcham Ruba.
The hemshech to this nigun, which is referred to as the Mitel Rebbe's Kapellia. Kapellia means a choir, orchestra. So although it's not mamish, the Mitel Rebbe himself had no connection to it. He did not conduct with it, and he did not compose any nigunim. But it was a group of chassidim from Chabad, Lubavitch, and also chassidim from other circles who would play different nigunim in front of the Mitel Rebbe. And one of the reasons, if not a major reason, that they had it was to keep the Mitel Rebbe from expiring in Kleis HaNefesh. The Mitel Rebbe would get very involved in meditation to the extent that it was a very big strain on his head. As they say, when he get to Yom Kippur, the Rebbe mentions that when he was in the Shtreimel by the break of Yom Kippur, so he would exert himself with meditation that sweat would come down from the Shtreimel, from his head. In other words, it was like a Rebbe said, a tzukar. Tzukar means with a point on the top. That it was basically the exertion of the Mitel Rebbe, how he was involved in meditation. So but the Mitel Rebbe, as the Rebbe writes in the Yom Chafei Tishri, the Mitel Rebbe did not compose any nigunim. The Alter Rebbe did compose nigunim, at least 10 nigunim, but by the Mitel Rebbe, it was just nigunim played in front of him. There was a sikha from the Rebbe, a talk that the Frierdiker Rebbe gave in Pesach Tovshin Gimel, 1943. And he's speaking about the different nigunim of the Kapella. And he mentions one of the nigunim is called the Rotzi V'Shuv Nigun. The Rotzi V'Shuv Nigun is a nigun which means Rotzi going up, yearning going up, and then Shuv settling back down, which this was typical nigunim that they used in order to keep the Mitel Rebbe as Eiris B'Kelim. Pashat Neshama Beguf. And actually that nigun is used today. Every Yom Tiv in Lubavitch is called a Duchanin nigun. The nigun they sing by Duchan is called Rotzi V'Shuv. And that's how it goes, the tune. One word up, next word down. Back and forth the tune from the Duchanin nigun. Another nigun, which is basically this nigun, the Kapellia nigun, that it's referred to as Kapellia proper, the nigun is basically this nigun. So the Frierdiker Rebbe says that this nigun is a message and a deep insight in the Aveda of a person. That Bishase comes to a person in doing his Aveda, so he's basically, Tefillah is the main tool that a person focuses on his animal soul, and then eventually he challenges the animal soul, and eventually he comes out victorious. So the Frierdiker Rebbe says the first part of this, the first stanza of the nigun is basically preparing. Like a person before davening, he prepares, he learns, he knows exactly what he's aiming for. And then comes thinking about his situation. The second stanza is thinking about his situation, where he finds himself, what level he's on, and how far he fell. So that's basically knowing exactly what the situation is. And then comes the third part, which is basically the loud part. So before that, you have the preparation, because he knows he's dealing with a Nefesh Abamis, who's called, the Frierdiker Rebbe refers to him as a Chayiro, a beast, evil beast. And Mele, he has to make sure that he has to get a grip on him. And then comes the third part, which is the highlight of the battle. That's when you attack the Nefesh Abamis from three fronts. There's a famous Maimer from the Alter Rebbe, I think Michoel Rebbe wrote it. The Maimer that in his time, at that time, they found a new tactic in fighting wars. That instead of everyone fighting from their front across their enemy, and Al-Derech said from the other side across their enemy, that they attack from all fronts together against one part of the enemy, then a second part, then a third part, which means that they build up from all fronts together a greater front, a greater force, and then they're able to overcome the enemy. Al-Pechsidis, this is that there's one way of refining one's love, Ave. So it's basically by fighting against the love, the desires that a person has for physical matters. That's one thing. Then there is fear of Hashem, challenging the fear of worldly things. Like the Rabbi says, when I get the pasuk in Parsha Ekev, the union from it is a union of midbar, lachash sorav the akrav, mitzimoyin asherein b'moyin. So it says it's a union of a midbar hagodol vehanera, eretz nochash v'akrav, mitzimoyin Hashem b'moyin. So the Rebbe says, what does it mean? It speaks about a yid, how he relates to the world around him. And that's where the Golus begins. And that's why we're told about it after in the weeks of consolation, after the Tisha B'Av. What are we told? We're told that we want to know the symptoms of an illness. We need to know what the cause for that is. Where does it come from? So the cause is because a person l'chatchila places himself in a position that he looks at the world in a way that it's eretz, midbar, it's an union of a desert, and it's nachash, it's a desert, and it's a nachash sort of the akrov. So tamidbar hagodol v'aneda. The first thing is he looks at the world. The Golus is compared to a desert. There's no positivity there. There's no growing. There's nothing there. And then comes, but in addition to that, the Yid builds up and he says, that's not so simple. He says, Hagodol, the world around us is bigger than us. We are a minority. So the Rebbe says that alone is one thing. But then he falls a step further, Vaneda. He becomes overwhelmed and stands in the awe for the world around him. He's completely shrunk. And the Me'eleh becomes Nachash Sarav Akrov. Nachash is basically poison. The poison is a hot poison, which means it gets a person heated up into worldly matters. When a person sees that the world around him is overwhelming him, he's outnumbered, and the Me'eleh, he feels that they're over him, he immediately becomes influenced by them. So the first thing he says, Amidbar, Hagodl, it's a big one. And then he says, Vanera, it's not I can hide in my corner. It throws an awe and everything. And then comes Nachash Sharav Akrav. Nachash, it gives the person a heat in worldly matters. In worldly matters, which means he becomes completely involved. The desire is world. He forgets about what he's here for. And then comes the union of Akrav. Akrav, a scorpion, is basically the poison is a cold poison, which is even worse than a snake. By a snake, there's the heat, but there's at least heat. There's liveliness there. There's excitement. The male person could always convert from heat of world to heat of Torah mitzvahs. When it comes to coldness, over there you can't do anything. It's an indifference. There's no liveliness at all. There's no sign of life. Father once told me that Bechlal, he would say that he was a doctor. He's a doctor by the Rebbe for 40 years. So they would say that the poison for a snake is hot. Mm-hmm. So what do you give it? You give something cold against it. Mm-hmm. Scorpion is cold. So the worst thing is it gets from both together. What does he do then to save himself? So the Rebbe says this is the union of Itzimoy, that even when he feels a thirst, he doesn't even know where to look. Asherein Moyim, he doesn't even know where to turn. And that's basically what the midbar is, and that's where the Gola starts. And that's where the monster starts, around us and in us, v'chulu v'chulu. So Akoponim, the union of Yira, we're talking about fear, is fear of the world. So therefore there's a fear of the Yid against the fear of the world. So therefore the Alter Rebbe says, it's a Maimer, I think I saw it handwritten by some Michoel Rebbe, Balagula, that he writes that the new tactic of the warrior is not to fight every front separately, but to gang up with your whole army on one front and a second front and a third front. And Mamela, that's when you're able, and actually it's connected to last week's Parsha. Where do we see it in last week's Parsha? The Ravtzu Kol Oreim that Bisaset came when they needed to open up the well. They needed to take off the stone. And they couldn't do it on their own. So everybody would join together to take off. There was Shleisha Edrich saying these are the three Midas, Chesed, Gvura, Tiferes, Ava, Yira, Racham, and Mercy. So this is basically teaches us how, that's how the Maimer, there's also some Asedik in Leidatei, I think also speaks about it. So B'cholei from the Michoel Rebbe's Kapelle. So the second part of the Nigni is that he's basically, and actually the third part is the loudness overcoming. And then eventually what he does is, in the Aveda of his Teira and Mitzvahs, this comes as a result of his davening. When it comes to davening, he's attending to his evil inclination. Then comes that he has to bring it down. He has to bring it down in vessels. And the vessels are Teira Mitzvahs. So that is the fourth part of the Nigla. So this is basically, in Michoel, by the Rebbe, the expression was, in Yiddish, the Rebbe would say the Lashon, Zogan Nign. Zogan Nign, say a Nign. Not sing a Nign, say a Nign. Singing could be sometimes empty. Saying means there's some meaning to it. A Nign says something. So that as a here, this was basically a Nign. The Frierdiker Rebbe Poshet explains. First, the person prepares himself with his potential strategy. Then he starts looking into what the deficiencies are, who he's dealing with. He's dealing with a Chayurah, says the Nefesh Abam is the animal soul, the Chayurah. And then comes the third part that he encompasses. He surrounds the enemy from all fronts. That's the loud part of the Nign. And then the Nign comes down, that it's how he already settles later down after that, after he davened, and he's settling down to the mitzvahs, which is basically as we see in Krishma. Krishma starts, V'haftas Hashem Elikechem. First thing is love Hashem. Then comes, V'hoyu advarim ha'ela. V'hoyu advarim ha'ela, V'shinamtom, Uksartom. So the Peder, what's the connection? So Chassidus explains, the Michoel Rebbe explains it, V'arichos, that the V'haftas Hashem Elikecho is the yearning to go to connect with Hashem. But then, it's not enough. It's not like a person hangs in the air. It has to come down in vessels. He's here, he has a mission in this world. The Meila, V'hoyu Advarim Meila, he sits down and he learns Torah. Lebeis HaKnesses, Lebeis HaMedrash. First davens, and then learning, and then he's able to go out in the world with mitzvahs, derech eretz, business, but this all starts from above. First is the connection. Tefillah is a ladder. As the Rebbe writes in the Yom of last week, it's a ladder that goes up. There's 4 steps. A ladder minimum is 4 steps. Likewise, Tefillah has 4 sections. There's Psuke de Zimra, there's Birchas Krishma, there is Psuke de Zimra, Birchas Krishma, there's Shemoneh Esrei. So basically there are, and the 4 Psuke de Zimra, there's the Heidu, Til Psuke de Zimra. So these are the 4 levels of worlds, which each level, each section of davening reflects one of the worlds, what takes place there. There are malachim that serve Hashem with intellect, there are malachim that serve with emotions, and then there is malachim which are lower yet. And that's why we say every day we speak about the malachim. Why do we have to speak about malachim? We're talking about neshamas. So the answer is because our animal soul comes from malachim. We're all, it comes from Leifanim, a low level, Chayus Hakedah, Fani Hakedah, and we remind him, Voichikol, you come from a very high ancestry. You're coming from Malachim. And Mamela, this is to shake up our animal soul. That when it comes to Krishna, we are ready to say V'haftas Hashem Elokecha, the whole of Vavcha with two bases, the animal soul and the godly soul. Because once he hears what's going on up there, he starts shaking also. So that's why we first talk about Malachem. And then we say, Avas Elam, now we're going to talk about the Nishamas, our relationship with Hashem. So basically, this is the Nikuda. The davening is not something which is in a different world, in a different, not referring to us, but as the Michoel Rebbe wrote, a few sharp letters, very sharp letters, not to speak by davening, and people should stand in one place, and they should daven loudly, besides Shemoneh Esrei, that's quiet. And the Michoel Rebbe says, I can't describe the aggravation I have when I see people are walking around and davening, and after when the chazan is started davening. So basically, Michoel Rebbe was very, wrote letters. The Rebbe Rashab also wrote letters. So I'm talking already, if it happened in that time, what should we say in our time? From what we should say is that the Michoel Rebbe stands very strong for that. The Michoel Rebbe says the tefillas that we daven goes through the Moras HaMachpelah, in addition to the Kislev Maravi, to Makom HaMikdash, Yerushalayim. And as the Michoel Rebbe says, that's why David HaMelech was 7 years in Hebron. Before he came to Yerushalayim, he was 7 years in Hebron, because he connected with the Ovis there. And then he went to Yerushalayim. So Al Kol Panim, the Nikuda is that when it comes to everything, a person should see what they can derive from it, a lesson in Avodas Hashem, a lesson that a person could live with it all his life. There are many Maimorim of the Michoel Rebbe. Michoel Rebbe spoke at great length. There's a Maimor from the Michoel Rebbe, a 40-page Maimor. Tipel Aleim. Tipel Aleim means that the fear should fall on them. So the Rebbe says the Lashon, Tipel Aleim HaGodel, that the fear should fall on enemies. A great fear, Tipel HaGodel, because it's a big Maimor. The Rebbe said Tipel HaGodel. So B'cholei from this is basically what the Michoel Rebbe wanted in Chassidus. It's mentioned, the Frierdiker Rebbe said that the Michoel Rebbe wanted when Chassidim meet, they should speak about Keseh. They should speak about Yehuda Ilah and Yehuda Tator. In other words, they should speak about the highest levels of Bittul, which this is what Jungelite should meet. That's what they should speak about. On another occasion, the Michoel Rebbe wanted that Chassidim should know about the attribute of Kesed as they know their own 5 fingers. Although not everybody is a book in the anatomy of the hand. Hand is not so simple either. It's called Yad because it has 14 joints. But it is knowing physically the physical hand. You should know Kesed. Michoel Rebbe, his whole koch was that. And the Tzemach Tzedek once said that if they would cut a finger by the Michoel Rebbe, it wouldn't be blood, it would be chassidus. As we'll see further, how a certain miracle, a miracle that happened right before his passing, and pushed it completely like a new person, like a Tchias HaMesim that night before the Stalkas, as we'll mention further.
The biggest of them, say that Hashem for the last couple of days in Syria. Miracles that you don't realize. Really miracles. Thank you, Rabbi Hashem. Amen. This give us this. Amen.
Ay, 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 ay,
I look who now in the Lashen.
Yeah. Was about such a thing. Yeah, yeah. Huh? That like yeah.
It is.
Ligon Shabbos or Yom Tov. It's one of the Ligun.
Number 336.
That's a different.
It's one of the first Lubavitcher records.
What?
This Ligon is one of the first Lubavitcher records. It's a very, it's a mentioned Benegia before the Stalkos of the Michoel Rebbe, which was on Tes Kislev. So this had a background. It was then that there was a certain decree that they were drafting young children into the Tsar's army. 8-9-year-old children were taken off from the street, from the house, and taken into the army. They were taken in for decades, and they were slept away from Yiddishkeit. A lot of them went al Kiddush Hashem, jumped into lakes. Others managed to push through. They're called Kantonisten. And there was a shul in Russia that they made later as Kantonisten. They held together. And it was at the end of the Tkufa of the Michoel Rebbe, and it was then that already years earlier he heard such a Gzeda was in the making, but it didn't really take off the ground. And at a certain point, it was right before the Stalkos of the Michoel Rebbe, he was at a wedding of his grandson or granddaughter, and he was very joyous and rejoicing with the young Chevre that came there and said Hasidus. And then he retired for the night. The Alter Rebbe came to him in a dream, and the Alter Rebbe says, "What are you rejoicing for? There is a decree that's mamish taking in effect now, and that's going to be a decree which will put on all Jewish children. The law was by them, the law here, the law hin. It was basically that anybody, any family that had more than one child, they took to the army. And the Tzemach Tzedek had an occasion to come a few times in the barracks to say a mimer for them, because if Tzemach Tzedek had as a privileged citizen, he had permission to say Maimorim, to deliver a mimer or two. And this is what it was. Now at that point, because of this Gzeira, the Michoel Rebbe traveled from Lubavitch to Haditch. He traveled to his father's resting place to be Me'era Rachamim, to be Mispalel for a Bittul HaGzeira, nullified this decree. And at that point, he also said a Maimer. Very unusual Maimer. It begins with Lahavin Inyan Likichas Anshe Chayil, to understand the Inyan of taking soldiers from Yidden for the army, young children. And the Michoel Rebbe explains in that Maimer, very, very unusual, that this is a message from above, that when a Yid is put into a situation that he cannot do Torah mitzvahs in a very delightful way, in a very easy way, but fakert he cannot do Torah mitzvahs b'klal, the pain that he has for him not being able to do Torah mitzvahs is considered like he fulfilled Torah mitzvahs with the biggest tainuk, with the biggest pleasure. This is the teichen of the Maimer. And the Michoel Rebbe said that Maimer later came to us over the generations. And then when he went out from the AO, he said, my father exempt me from the Rabbonis, from the leadership. He said he wants to go to Yisrael, so they asked him who's going to take over. He said it's Tzemach Tzedek, his son-in-law. The Michoel Rebbe did not make it back. He meant that Yisrael, he meant after 120. He did not make it back to Lubavitch. He got sick on the way. He was in Nezhin. He was there either in a hospital or in a house, and the doctors were attending to him. And at one point, that night of going on to test Kislev, the doctor saw that he's not responding. There's no sign of anything. So one doctor said to another, there's one option we still have. Give him permission to speak. Whisper into his ear, you're giving permission to speak. As soon as they whispered it into his ear, the Michoel Rebbe set up, asked they should put him in a sitting position. He started to speak for about an hour and a half. This is Poshet, his life, his fingers, everything was to this. And then he said he's going to speak about the cage, the Gula. At that point, Siddim were pushing around the bed, and the hat of one of them fell on the Michoel Rebbe. Michoel Rebbe said this is a simon that he has to stop. Instead, the Michoel Rebbe said another Maimer. The Maimer began to imchom mekeir chayim. He didn't finish the word chayim, and he was nostalgic by the word chayim. So the Tzemach Tzedek said, since the Rashbi, we did not see such a istalkus. The Rashbi was nostalgic by the pasuk Kishom Tziva Hashem as Abracha Chayim. So the Tzemach Tzedek says by the Michoel Rebbe was imchom mekeir chayim. The Michoel Rebbe was also asking the whole time if it's already day, because that's his Yom Haledes. He was exactly 54 years. That's when he was Nistalik. His Eyal, his resting place, is in Nezhin. That's where Hasidim travel, especially in the last 30 years. It's really picked up a lot, and there were renovations done. And Bichlal, when it came to the the Rebbe would always speak about broadening the Inyan of Chassidus, publishing Inyan of Chassidus. The Rebbe was one of the few Rebbes who published his works in his lifetime. We don't find it by the Alter Rebbe, besides Tanya. We don't find it by the Rabbi who followed. We find it by the Rebbe, that he poshet in his lifetime. He published the Svarim, and whatever he didn't manage, he asked his son to continue publishing Teras Chaim, v'chulo. So the Mela, basically, it's the Inyan of publishing. The Alter Rebbe's Maimorim were published 27 volumes in the 1980s. Tzemach Tzedek in 1960s, 45 volumes. And that's only a drop in the ocean. Tzemach Tzedek wrote in his lifetime 600,000 pages. Every day, from 12 years old, he would write 12 pages. It's a whole, and a lot of them were burnt in fires, probably most of it, sadly. Tzemach Tzedek wrote. Now the Michoel Rebbe would be a very quick writer. The Michoel Rebbe would write, and it would be up to the line 60, the first one would still be wet. Wow. First line would be wet. And if there was no paper, he continued writing on the table. And after his istalkus, there was a fire, and the table burned down. Also the Sas Maisa. So B'chol Eifim, we're talking here about Himus Inyanim, like really heavenly Inyanim, how the Rabbeim wrote, how the Rabbeim spoke. It was, so one of the Maimer that we're talking about, that the Alter Rebbe, that the Michoel Rebbe said, the Rebbe said once the Maimer, his Maimer on Parsha Yisrei, and based it on the Maimer the Michoel Rebbe said. He was speaking about the Yidden in Russia. The Rebbe applied this whole Inyan. The Rebbe elaborated many times on this Maimer through the years. We see it in different sikhs, different years. And the Rebbe used this Maimer from many different insights. One of them is Benegir Yidden in Russia. The Rebbe says it's not Shaykh Mesiras Nefesh. Mesiras Nefesh is Shaykh to jump down. It's not Shaykh to jump up. So even to get an esrog, to get a tefillah, to get tefillah, it's not Shaykh. It's impossible to get it even with Mesiras Nefesh. So the Rebbe says, B'meila, this is where it comes in the explanation of the Michoel Rebbe that the aggravation, the pain that a person has that they cannot do it is considered like they did it with the biggest delights, Torah mitzvahs. The Rebbe said that Maimer, as I mentioned, and it was obvious from Chassidim then, it was in 1964, and it was obvious that the Rebbe was talking to the Eibishter. He was talking to HaKadosh Baruch Hu about the matzav of Yidden in Russia. After Shabbos, that Shabbos, there were 3 Chassidim personalities there, guests. One was Rab Fole Khan, Rabbi Elkan's father. One was Rab Mendel Futterfast. And one was, I think, Rab Zalman Yaffe. I don't know if he has a line to find him, but he was there then also, that Shabbos. Although he usually comes for Shulas. Rabbi Elkan, I once asked the Rebbe if he should write up the Maimer because his father is leaving, and maybe he should write up the Maimer that he should take it along in Eretz Yisrael. So the Rebbe said, Medarfnish, there's no need. In other words, this wasn't like something the Rebbe intended it should be published. It's something the Rebbe had to deliver that Shabbos, and whatever needed to be accomplished is accomplished. Then I heard from Rabbi Melech Tzvibel, Olav Hashalim, that he said from another angle we heard that the Rebbe said to tear the Maimer. Tear it. Right? Chassidim are not going to tear a Maimer. So everyone tore in the corner of the page, and they were yetzer with that. So this is how the Maimer made it to us. And 1990, when the Hebrew Sikha started to come out, the translation of the Yiddish Sikha, that's when they also published this Maimer. So the Rebbe derives from this Maimer a few interesting lessons. One, Benegir, the Yidden in Russia that are helpless, they can't do any Torah mitzvahs. And then comes another lesson. A very interesting lesson, Benegir Neshama, comes down here. It's called Tinik Shanishba, taken in captivity, never did Torah mitzvahs, never did a mitzvah in his life. So the Rebbe said, what is he here for? What's his mission? What's his purpose in life? So the Rebbe says, Milmaila, there is a certain time and occasion that he is given the opportunity to do a mitzvah, and he does it with such an excitement, with such a liveliness, and this is basically compensating for everything else. This is his shlichus in the world. This one time that he's doing a tinik shanishba. And the mele he's hopping around then doing Torah mitzvahs. One mitzvah, the Rebbe says, and that's more important by Hashem than the usual pattern there, because this person comes from a different environment. He's a tinik shanishba, a child taken in captivity. Now that is that the Rebbe says this not only by a child taken in captivity, it is also by every person. When a person looks at the day schedule, mostly he's involved in mundane matters. He's not involved in Torah. He davens, and then he has learning, and then he goes on to business. Reva Yem is business. Yeah, the Friedrich Rebbe says that a person should put down a sefer before he goes to work, and remember that the sefer is waiting for him when he comes home. When is he going to learn? Sichim the pace. But upon him, the Metzias is most of the day goes away. That so a person has to question why. Why can't I have an opportunity? And how come it doesn't work out that I should have it Torah mitzvahs throughout the day? The answer is because he has two shlichusim. Person has in the world two things. He has on one hand, he has the inyanim of Torah mitzvahs, and then he has inyanim of doing with world. And the Rabbi brings a very interesting example. I don't remember ever seeing it. I think so this week because I'm preparing it for the Zefreinas, for the broadcast. The Rabbi mentions over there is the Yashakeach for Torah mitzvahs, and there's the Yashakeach Asher Shibarto, which means the lack of Torah mitzvahs. In other words, that he's doing other things, that's a shlichus in the world. He has to deal with things that he has to do for parnasa, livelihood, for the health of his body, everything. So basically, these are the two parts, and for both of them, they're both equal. And that is why he's doing it. So he's also in a situation that the Eibush appreciates that he's also doing that other part of the work that he needs to do, because that's how it works out for him as a neshama and a guf. So I'll call upon him, the nikud is that we find ourselves in a free country. Especially that we have election, which we got in somebody who's a decent guy, and b'meile the Sainya, which is Dafke Yonim, went to the Eil v'cholo. The Rebbe says are helping that he should be able to be matzliach and accomplish what he needs to accomplish. The teva from Yidden, the teva for the world, as the Rebbe said, to make this world l'sheves yitzora. And the Nikudi is, the Rebbe says, also benegir to the Yidden that came from Russia, that although they had a difficult time, but Lepeil now, the Rebbe says they are in a free country, they should use the same live Mesiras Nefesh that they had then, although they don't need self-sacrifice, but they should use the same energy they used then also now. And this is the word from the Baal Shem Tov. Came back the same way that I was thirsty. In dry land, I should also have it by Kedesh. That also when I'm already found in an environment of Kedesh, I should be able to fulfill it all with the Ganze Lishmak. That's what the Rebbe was urging the Yidden. They came out from Russia then. I remember in 1972. So big Elam came to the Rebbe for Tishrei. And some people called it the Russian Tishrei, because it was like a whole Elam came. Zaltzman, the families, it was like they brought the Gunim. It's like a whole, the Rebbe catered to them. It was like a few things the Rebbe gave special for them. That's how everybody merited. So the Cholei from the Rebbe urged them that they should continue weiter, and they shouldn't slack off, and they shouldn't stop, but basically continue weiter, although they're in the United States or in other countries with the Inyanim of Torah mitzvahs. So I'll call upon him, the Rebbe says, that this is all Inyanim that Yidden are still in Golas. So it should be the Rebbe should take our out from Golas as we find ourselves now in Yom HaGeula of the Michoel Rebbe. So Meil, it's a time of redemption. All the redemptions are connected. Same Geula, Chad, they're all connected. If it's an individual Geula, it's not individual Geula, especially as Chassidim, that we learn also from the Torah of the Michoel Rebbe. It's also a connection with the Michoel Rebbe, especially in a day like this. It would be auspicious to learn something from the Michoel Rebbe. The Meila connecting with the Michoel Rebbe. Und damals wird man haben, the Meila connected with the Baal HaGeula of Yud Kislev. The Meila wird man haben all the Inyanim b'Shleimus.
Amen.
Okiyayol taray galafike moye mekenapshi sarogeleto noyaki yayol taray galafike mekenapshi sarogeleto noyaki Sama yashi laila can can be side and then
I mentioned earlier, Benegea, the connection of the Michoel Rebbe and the Alter Rebbe. So we find it in different occasions, and we find it very pelodic in the Yom of tomorrow, which in tomorrow's Yom the Rebbe writes that it's in the Yom it's mentioned that the Alter Rebbe began saying the Tanya from Rosh Hashanah Tov Kuf Nun, time that the Tzemach Tzedek was born, at Rosh Hashanah, and he continued till Tes Kislev, and Tes Kislev. Okay.
You need glasses?
Oh, there's the stuff. Tes Kislev state, yeah. Oh, Tes Kislev state, and he continued saying then till Tes Kislev, and then it says. It's very interesting. Tes Kislev Tov Kuf Nun Daled, the Alter Rebbe said a Maimer, and that's the beginning of the 53rd chapter of Sefer Shel Beinanim, which speaks about Bayis Rishon. Then he continued to finish the Pedic till the end, the Mocharos, the next day. So the question is, what did he wait for the next day? That day, Tes Kislev is the birthday of the Michoel Rebbe. He became then 20 years old. And by 20, the Rabbi really said a special maimer, Mebenasim Shona, it's in the Kutetera, Bamidba. So what's the word lemocharos? It's like there's an extension. He decided he's going further. And here we see Ruach HaKodesh. This is 33 years on this very day, 33 years later, that the Michoel Rebbe was freed from prison. So the Alter Rebbe decides to finish the Tanya on the day that his son is going out from prison. Yud Kislev Tov Kuf Nun Dalet, and this was Tov Kuf Pei Zayin, 33 years later, Gal Shona. In addition to that, we find another interesting connection, a very interesting connection. The Michoel Rebbe, when he was arrested, talking about the Geula, his Chassidim were a whole different type of Chassidim. Not typical of any generation of Chassidim. They were completely in a different world. They had one interest on their mind. Our Rebbe is arrested. Let's make sure they give him permission to say my Marim in prison. More like less. The Professor Habenthal, who heard this request, and he was close with the Michoel Rebbe, and he was close with the government. They respected him very much. He looked at them like wild. But he kept it in the back of his mind. A meeting will come up. He'll see what happens. Meeting came up, and lo and behold, they granted the permission. The Michoel Rebbe is permitted to say Maimonim, and he's permitted to daven with the Elam. And the Michoel Rebbe was not arrested in Peterborough. He was arrested in Vitebsk. And he had a big room at Tzar Health. He needed air circulating. And he was there with his son, Rab Nochem. And immediately, it was Friday, the government is approved that they can come in 3 million a day, not more than 20 people. Shabbos could be a maimer, not more than 50 people. You make a cheshbon 5 weeks, the math, almost 1,000 people made it in, alternating. Sidim didn't lose time. It was Friday. They immediately got a million in for Friday. And Shabbos, there was a maimer, and every Shabbos, the Michoel Rebbe said a maimer. He didn't have any svarim with him. Said a maimer every Shabbos. Shabbos Vayetze, Tes Kislev, on the day of his birthday, he gets word that he's free. Can't go anywhere Shabbos. He sat down and he said a maimer Ato Echad. Ato Echad, V'shimcha Echad, Shabbos Mincha. In the middle of the maimer, he stops and he says, Nu mokim der Tateido. Make a space, my father is here. Which means the Alter Rebbe came from a higher world to participate in the Geula of his son. The Rebbe explains it in a Maimer. In a Maimer, the Rebbe explains what this means. The Rebbe says, the Alter Rebbe represents the attribute of Chochmah. The Michoel Rebbe is the union of Bina, analysis. The Alter Rebbe is Chochmah, the beginning of Chassidus. The Michoel Rebbe is the riverbanks, more comprehension, elaboration. The Mela, the Kabbalah says that Chochmah and Bina go together. They're not separated. They're like two friends. The Lomis Parshan, they don't separate. The Mela, by the Geula of the Michoel Rebbe, the Alter Rebbe came. And that's why the Michoel Rebbe said, Tnu moken der Tatida. Father's here. They had no idea what direction to open away. It was like the middle. And Sunday, the Michoel Rebbe went back to Lubavitch. It was, the Michoel Rebbe was arrested for two reasons, false libels. One was because after the war of Napoleon, the cities of the Jewish cities were destroyed, and they set up a board in 1814 that they should help people rebuild, resettle, and even sometimes for Parnasa, a lot of Chassidim went into farming, Avedas Adoma. And the Michoel Rebbe spent with them 6 months, 1 year, 6 months. So when it came to this Inyan, there were a few Chassidim who were appointed to be in charge of the money. One of them is the famous Rabbi Pinchas Reizes. Why is he called Reizes? The name Reizes is the Shviga's name. Who's going to call himself with the name of the Shviga? So the Mitzvah says that there's a background to this story. She was a very rich person, had a lot of real estate. And when she saw the Alter Rebbe in his young age, traveling around cities and winning over Chassidim, she said, whoever follows him, I give them my whole inheritance. Rabbi Pinchas was a son-in-law. She said, I need a note. I also need a note that you were there. Rabbi Pinchas traveled to the Alter Rebbe. He became one of the chief chayzim. He would repeat from the Alter Rebbe the Maimorim. He was there for years, very reliable. And once he was done, he sent the note. It could be he remained in Liadi, in Liozna, but he got to send the note to the Shviga. I just wanted to make sure. And then she gave him all the real estate, and the Alter Rebbe on an occasion once came to say a maimer at a Chanukas Abayis of his house. It was a walled house. It's called Ir Tema, like part of the wall. So basically, this is a story with Rabbi Pinchas Reizes. Rabbi Pinchas Reizes did not have any children. He had a nephew. And that nephew was a big troublemaker. When he saw that there is a document about money, he wanted the money. He is the sole inheritor. So they said, no, it's not your money, son. So he decided to take up against the Michoel Rebbe, and he made up a false libel, money, and Michoel Rebbe is conducting himself, this, that. And this is one of the reasons he was arrested. The second reason was Michoel Rebbe's mother's family. Michoel Rebbe's mother's family were misnagdim. They were envious of the Michoel Rebbe, their cousin, and they made a libel that he's conducting himself as a Kohen God, and he's building the Beis Hamikdash, which is a joke in itself. Couldn't be a bigger joke, because Lubavitch Michoel was so small, it wasn't even shaykh. So when they came and they arrested him for that, because the Tsar felt it was an offense to him. Later, the measure they saw, it just didn't make any sense. So it took years. Although the Michoel Rebbe was freed, it was after his istalkus when all the accusations were cleared, and he was and particularly from everything. Now, during the hearing, what happened was that when it was the hearing, and that guy, the nephew, came to the hearing, the nephew of Rabbi, he stumbled with his mouth, and he said, he called the Michoel Rebbe. So Michoel Rebbe says to the officers, he says, give a look what's going on here. Here he says, I'm a rebeller, I'm who knows who. Then he calls me with honor a Rebbe. How does it go together? So that's when he lost face, and that's when everything started to go downhill for him, and he lost the case, and Michoel Rebbe was freed. Now, this was a year before the istalkus of the Michoel Rebbe. It was a year before. And Mamela, when the istalkus of the Michoel Rebbe took place, it was a day before the first anniversary. Chassidim were not up to Farbrengen, so he just passed away. By them, the Michoel Rebbe is everything. So they weren't. They did not have any cheshik to Farbrengen, and that's why it's not like Yutas Kislev. The 10th of Kislev is not like Yutas Kislev because it's a whole different background. And that's why they say also there's a nigun that Chassidim sung. They sang then, the nigun was the Rebbe soll geheißen Freilach sein. The Rebbe geheißen Freilach sein, this was a nigun like the Rebbe urged to be joyous. So although they were very broken, they were also singing that nigun. But I'll call upon him now that we find ourselves many years later. We see by the Rebbe Farbrengen, Tas Kislev, not every year, but the Rebbe Farbrengen. So basically this is a day of good resolutions. It's an auspicious day, especially for Chassidim, learning his Torah. We connect with him. The Rebbe asked the question when he gave the Michoel Rebbe that when you learn something of the one who delivered a certain Torah, so you need, the Yerushalmi says, you have to picture like his image is right in front of you. In the Michoel Rebbe, there's no pictures. So what does one do? The Rebbe answers very simple. The Rebbe says, in the same way that when it comes to Torah, we connect with Hashem, Eisi Atem Leichim, as the Medrash says in Truma, say a Medrash, Eisi Atem Leichim, we connect with Hashem, even although he doesn't have an image of a body, not an image of a body. Likewise, by the tzaddik, the main thing is we connect with his Torah, we connect with him, although we don't have the image. So basically, this was basically the Nekuda. It's told when again, Tzemach Tzedek once said that by the Michoel Rebbe, his father-in-law, it wasn't shaykh to have a picture, to take a picture. Why? Nobody has any idea. Because every minute he was a different image. And the Mele, he couldn't like to designate, this is who he is. So it was Pashit, as each state, that's what it's mentioned in the Sipurim that reached us. So B'chol Eifim, it is a union of, it's a union of riverbanks, which means it flows over. The same thing is also with Chassidus, the same thing is also with the pride of Chassidim. That as a person walks in the street, it's obvious that he is a freilacher, that he's dafka an eifim of joy, and dafka besimcha, and a person doesn't postpone one thing for another day, but basically does right away everything, as Chassidim do everything, and they do it besimcha to live up. They do it dafka besimcha. There's one somebody came to the Rebbe, gave over about a certain person who wasn't well, and he's sitting and crying the whole time. The Rebbe says, What does he have to sit and cry? Let him sit and laugh. What does it mean? Basically, that simcha is a inyan that sweetens dinim. The Zayar says when a person shows a simcha here, there's a simcha l'mayla. Tochazi, that the way a person shows, the anpe, the face that he shows, the ape that he shows here, that's what happens l'mayla. And that is why B'Sasa was the word of Yom Kippur, the Rebbe spoke about simcha. The Rebbe said, how could there be simcha? They're fighting a war. Yidden are fighting a war in a different part of the world. So the Rebbe says, because through simcha we sweeten the dinim. The Rebbe says, with this we'll also understand the Maisa that happened by the Alter Rebbe. The Alter Rebbe was interrogated. Very delicate, serious, heavy-duty interrogation. Very sensitive points, 21 questions, and he answered everything. The last question was something which seemed to be offensive to others, and B'meila then he just smiled. He wrote it in Tanya, and it seemed to be offensive. So they asked, what does this mean? He didn't answer, he smiled. So there's different explanations given. One explanation is like saying, I answered you 21 questions. Let this one pass. But here the Rebbe explains a deeper meaning. By smiling, he was sweetening the dinim l'mayla, so the one here remained speechless. He let it through, because everything comes l'mayla. Since the prosecutor l'mayla was already silenced, but Mela here also he was silenced. So Mela, this is the union of simcha. That simcha is the union of the Tzemach Tzedek once said trachgut et zayngut. There was once a person who had a child who needed help, and it was before Simchas Torah, and he said Simchas Torah, trachgut et zayngut, and he danced with a big simcha, and he broke through all the limitations. And that's basically the union of simcha, which is higher than our medida v'agbola. So the Rebbe says, as the Rebbe said, the Lashon b'negiah ki v'simcha seitzeyu, that with simcha, with joy, we go out from Golus, and this is basically breaking the last obstacles and the last outhold from the union of Golus and going Pashat at Yisrael, B'Koriv Mamash. Ich weiß nicht, Franzach hat der Rebbe gebeten.
Soll schon sein,
Ich weiß nicht, der Rebbe gebeten.
soll schon sein, hier, soll schon sein, hier, Mashiach, soll schon kommen, ay, la, ay, la, ay, la, 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 ay, 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 ja, 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 Aniola, soll schon sein, Aniola, soll schon sein, Aniola, Mashiach, soll schon kommen, Schumich, Aniola, Aniola, Mashiach, soll schon kommen, ay, 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 soll schon sein, Aniola, soll schon sein, Aniola, soll schon sein, Aniola, Mashiach, soll schon kommen, Aniola, soll schon sein, Aniola, soll schon sein, Aniola, Mashiach, soll schon kommen.
Okay, if anybody has any questions,
What's the song?
Q&A.
Rebbe Geis and
Q&A.
Bell sang?
Rebbe Yesen, Freila,
Ein
Zahn,
Fehler
Freila,
zusammen sein, ein Fehler sein, Fehler zusammen sein, ein Fehler sein,
Freila sein, trinken Wein, dachte ich ganze Wein. It's a lot of ingredients over there.
Can't see
But you
you.
get simcha, and simcha a little bit, yeah.
Rebbe was sitting, die sollten miteinander nehmen.
Oh, them does, ja, zei.
En dan is een heel song. Aber mit der Frage bitte nicht.
Oh, yeah, das kann sein, ja. Wir haben nicht gehört, Hein haben sich schon vergessen.
I forgot already.
Yeah, I think about yeah.
When he's,
But
yeah.
that's Kislev, but I think Wednesday that year. Yeah. Yeah. It's a ganze story. Mitel the Rebbe's Ksovim, a lot of them ended up in Yisrael because he sent Chassidim there, and he promised them he's giving them the writings. There's no copies, so they ended up there. And over the years, they were discovering a lot and bringing back to the Rebbe. So although the Mitel Rebbe spoke a lot and wrote, but a lot of things we possibly don't have. I mean, that they didn't reach us because it ended up there in Eretz Yisrael.
So I tell you what, because this way it was preserved.
So, but depends on where it ends up. Moonshine would recover things. Shazar brought gifts to the Rebbe. He bought Ksavriyaden that he brought to the Rebbe like new things.
Wow.
He paid good money for it, plus like a folder, letters, the Razei could do. He knew exactly what the Rebbe wanted.
I remember my father went to Israel and he'd go, he'd call label. Most coming out in trees, I remember, but maybe told me can't buy it. It was too much money. The Rebbe never wanted. There was some Sadik at Sabiat from there, pieces of an SCO. And yeah, no, it was 800. This is going back to get close. It was $800, and label said that the Rebbe didn't want it, and it was always paid.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, the Rebbe was
At that time, it was
very strong.
Very high price, and the Rebbe was very concerned that they'll.
Yeah. The Rebbe says they'll just go crazy about prices. And nothing encouraged them.
Sachos always told my father, I'll take care of it, But the Rebbe, he found out the stuff. Whenever he came back, he bought.
So is that around today? It came here finally, the Ksabiyah?
Then I have no idea. I just remember
it's again the
that Rebbe knew about it, it seemed, and didn't want us to solve this. So Rebbe was very concerned that they saw him.
Right.
Don't take it back.
Yeah, the Rebbe did not want to get it. The Rebbe says, "Ain't paid him Yesem Mishav Yeyem." He didn't want to be all right. It's not shit about the Rebbe. Oh. I read this week. Somebody asked me about a Mokim, so I couldn't find it. There was a certain sefer that was owned by a Lubavitcher. He himself got it from a shul that in Poland, Zuhu. And they found it later, and the name of the person says in the book, in the sefer. And they brought it to the Rebbe. And then the Rebbe looked at the name, Zalman Gerari, which means he got it from somewhere else. So they asked the Rebbe about the Tekuma Mitainis, that it says. The Rebbe says the halacha is, if you recover something from Zute Shel Yam, like the Muhammad, Hareza Shalei. Whoever found it, it's his. Who does that from the Rebbe says that's what he should be told. So Taka, it came to the library. So,
Yes, it does.
Yeah, aber kommt man mal in the Jana Jahr not in gemacht.
UCLA bought a large collection of started. My father was friends with the Jewish librarian. What the was listening, talking that there's a big beef with the cities there. So he went and he told my father, he can't give it to him, but he'll lend it to him. So my father took it and sent it to the Rebbe. So it arrived on Shabbos. He heard the label called me to let him know. And once the Shabbos, they opened the package. And inside was a mimer that Shabbos, the Rebbe knew about the mimer. Sishman, the book, Rebbe knew about the mimer whichever way. And in there was the mimer that the Rebbe was looking for. The Rebbe is geschickt. And my father went there, and he made, got some fancy binding, whatever, and he sent back a copy. But he originally sent it, the Rebbe sent it back. Because he had to give it back to UCLA.
Oh, so much Gacha Prati is the Bichel came, but the Rebbe knew before.
Shabbos and Shabbos.
Then it is given, when she given. Because the Rebbe mentioned a lot of times this thing.
But this was
66
again. It wasn't from one of the Rabbi. It was a compilation.
Right. That was given because he came from Iran once. The Rebbe mentioned Toshach Hagov that even in Iran found the Sefer. They gave it to the Rav. The Rav saw that it's not for him, this material, and he gave it over right away to someone. So, kommt dann eine von den Sachen, das ist eine historische Sache.
Well, from what the Rabbi and the Michoel is the most simple one.
Is the most what?
Like a simple tzion, nothing.
Ich weiß nicht, man verredet mit David Nachschen, ich weiß nicht, they were doing it then, they had a rust. I don't know what to call it. I mean, they renovated a lot of stuff there. They lost from the Rebbe. Recent stuff from the Rebbe.
You didn't know anything.
Oh, the middle of no, you mean in the set where it is? There's no kvarim. Aren't they say this like?
It's like really like middle know.
For me,
The Rebbe father, like in a Muslim, there's a man who's almost like.
you mean the whole shetach around is laid? They didn't move him, so that's where we replaced him. There was no other Beis Hacham, there were no other people. Because there's family members there. The son Ver, see Rab Nochem, I mean, he had Poshet. There was the Adats, the Peretz, the Chains. Because now they're recovering in the Lubavitch, they're recovering Matzeves,
Yes.
the Rebbetzins Matzeves. There's a lot of stuff happening. They're remodeling the Zal. As a ganze world in this and everything, bring up Sal. Very choshev.
About the restarting in the Lubavitch.
Yeah. The Mamish, the Shliach Gordon is there. The real Gordon, he's Mamish doing, with all the dimensions and everything. Matzeves, they found a lot. Also, there was never the World War II. There was a lot of people hidden that they found Matzeves from them. Killed in Lubavitch. They went out in Tovshin Nun. They come in a group of shluchim. They were in Russia, and the Rebbe said they should go to Lubavitch also. So it was a shluchim from Russia, Medina, certain Medinas. Rabbi Askin was one of them. Rabbi Askin comes, I heard the Maisa from him, that's it. He comes, they come to Lubavitch, they meet the non-Jews over there. Fragen sie die Jiden, who are you? So I said, we're Lubavitch. You're Lubavitch. We're Lubavitch. We live here all year round. I said, Lubavitch, the Rebbe, they bought a house for the Rebbe in Lubavitch. So Tovshin Nun, the Rebbe marks it in his Star Mechiras Chametz. They bought the house then, and also have a museum. They have pictures of it.
Yes.
See, Kamat Gonaji, believe me, Lubavitch, there's Kamat nothing. It's like a few houses. The Rebbe says, "V'chal v'shtat in ishkin greisa shtat." The Rebbe told Handel Lieberman to draw a map of Lubavitch. The Rebbe says, "He came on this given in Lubavitch, and Sidor Binyamin Stiebel, this Stiebel. I want to know where it is." So he drew a map with a label, and on the top right, he wrote "Confirmed by Rab Zalman Shimon Dworkin and by Handel Lieberman." You're both in Lubavitch.
A couple of streets.
Yeah, Heights. I don't even know where the Orchem must have stayed in villages around for Tishrei. He's coming some Rebbe, Rosh Hashanah. It's like a Shavuos. He must have stayed somewhere. It's like Valget in the...
Yeah, like Lubavitch in the little village, a couple of streets, like 20, 30 houses.
Der Rebbe sagt, sie nicht von der Größe Stadt. Das ist nicht von der Größe Stadt.
Quarter neighborhood.
Ja. Aber,
So they're going to march and go.
yeah, Matzevis from both. But Be'etzem, the Rebbe Marash was born there, the Rebbe Rashab, and the Frierdiker Rebbe. The Rebbe Rashab did not want to leave Lubavitch. The Rebbe Rashab, mamish, till the last minute the wagon was loaded, and he's waiting. And so told one of the Chassidim, it's finished, he doesn't want to leave. Finally, I had no choice because of the war, World War I, and they were out after Jewish leaders. But they pushed it. He was very fond of it. The Rebbe makes a cheshbon, Kuf Beis Shana. The Rebbe speaks about Kapitel Kuf Beis and Tilim, connects it with that. It's very interesting. Rabbi Beis Tamas Farbrengen.
Some said they think there were a lot of Sunni. I mean,